Hi, everyone. Um, so this is obviously an experiment we haven't done before. Try to turn off these advertisements. So I don't know. I'm not sure what this is. Is it a class? Is it a online meetup or something? But let's say it's a class. So why don't we all virtually bow to the Kamiza? You don't have to physically do it. You can just mentally do it, and then bow to each other mentally or virtually. Um, Interestingly, if you didn't physically move and you just imagine yourself bowing, that's key. So anyway, you can note that. So I'm not sure what the best format will wind up being for these things, but what I decided to do tonight was show a few videos and we can discuss them. Some of them are more instructive, and in particular, the Jo Kata is something you can do at home, even with a broomstick if you don't have a Jo. And some of the other ones are more for fun or because I think they're cool. So, you know, that I hope that will be also valuable because some of them like show some really amazing Aikido. So aside from the instructional aspect, I think it's good to see some of these things. Okay, so this first video is a video of a seminar that Kanai Sensei and Yamada Sensei did in Luxembourg. It must have been like the mid 80s. It just shows some really cool demonstrations. So Luxembourg seminar. So this is Kanai Sensei and Steve Carabino. So, you know, that you can see what he's doing is he's doing the technique slow a few times and then fast a few times. You know, one thing about video that's a little weird is that Kanai Sensei kept changing things as he went along. He was like evolving, he was working on the art. So when he started, as we'll see later in an old video, his kind of body movement was different than it wound up being. And as time passed, he started accentuating the Toitsutai concept much more. But you'll see in some of these sort of middle era ones, it's sort of a combination. Okay, here we go. Start again. So this is Claude with Sensei. So obviously that was Kotegaish, Ryote-tori Kotegaish Omote Waza.
Sensei, can I ask a question on that one?
Yeah.
So I noticed this is Joel, by the way.
Yeah.
So on the throw, there was a really, really big circular movement, like with his hands. So I've often wondered, like, you know, you kind of keep your hands in front, you know, of your center line, or, you know, is there sort of complementary, like, because that was a really big motion, or is that one of those things that changed over time?
Well, I think here's another thing that's funny. He told us what to do sometimes, but he didn't always do it. And so when you, I think the rule is that you do keep your hands in front of your body. I'm going to play this again. Let's look at it again. So that all looks pretty, that one, his hands are pretty much in front of his center line. That one, that one lagged a little bit, but,
Yeah, that's good.
is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that on both of the fast throws, it looked like. Maybe more on the first one.
His hand looked like it went high.
But still straight up and down, but just kind of, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing that's, funny about watching video. I mean, so when we were in the dojo with him and things are changing and he's not always doing what he's telling us to do. And sometimes he would do things that you'd look at it and you'd say, it looks one way, but it was actually something else. So when you're watching him like every day over time, everything sort of smooths out. But I think when you take one thing out of time, it emphasizes the things that are not normal. But there are all these variables. So he didn't always do it perfectly. And especially, I think, in this case, he was really cranking it on. So I think he was putting a little extra on everything. I think at this seminar, I think it was one of the first times he'd gone to Europe. I feel like he wanted to make a little statement in this seminar for the European people, just to get their attention a little bit. Because in Europe, at least in the places that we traveled, their style is very much influenced by Tamura Sensei and Sugano Sensei, and it's really quite different in the way they approach things. So Riminage Omote Waza, which was really a new thing for them. The other thing you might notice is that, the way we got up from break falls changed over time. And the standard became getting up to the outside, which I think is what we more or less do today. But at that time, when I started, like, people would just take break falls in a regular forward roll position. And Kanai Sensei started introducing, this is more like a judo type break fall, I believe. And so when we first started, like you've seen in these, we were getting up to the inside. We can go back and look at that if everybody's interested, but just another note. So again, these are things that changed over time. So this is Ogoshi. Oh, okay. Well, it may be Surubi. No, I don't think it's Surubi Goshi.
Yeah, he's got the hand in the arm,
It's in the elbow, but usually Surubi Goshi is on the wrist, no?
Right.
So Hikite Hajiki Goshi. Now he's showing each hand separately. Now this is interesting. That's what happens when someone doesn't know the techniques. The black belt guy does a little better.
That's a good PSA for learn the Akemi.
Yeah. And here we go, Ogoshi again. I mean, you can see, like I always tell you guys, Kanai Sensei's Koshinage, he always keeps turning. He never comes back and steps in front of them. He always keeps turning in the ura direction, which is really cool. You know, there's a little variation there in how he's doing it, especially when he does it fast. Okay, let's just stop there for a second. Now I'm gonna show a little bit of Yamada Sensei's class also, because you know, really back in those days, like there were so many seminars with the two of them. So just to get a little flavor of what that was like, we'll show a little bit of that. But any other questions or comments on Kanai Sensei's part there?
Hi, this is Ricky. Kanai Sensei was so explosive, wasn't he, Sensei?
Oh yeah, yes. You know, he was a very laid back guy, but when he wanted to crank it on, oh, he could really crank it up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's the sense that, you know, as I'm watching, the way that he would enter, you know, Uke's space for the final part of it is just so amazing. Just to watch that.
You mean on the Koshinage or?
Well, I've been watching, you know, from the very first technique. I mean, when he decides it's over and it's either over the hip or I'm watching it over the top of the thigh, you know, at the end of it, when he gets into the space to do the throw, he's so deeply into Uke's space.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to watch the physics of it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, he often emphasized getting close to the UK, both on, for example, on Koshinage, you know, or like on Makiotoshi, Hajiki Goshi, you know, many Riminage. Yeah, he was, that was an important point he stressed all the time, getting very close.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was actually wondering about like the way he positioned himself, and like when the throw's going, there's this, like, I don't know if it's like a step that like he steps, I don't know, like backwards. I was just trying to like observe that.
Which technique you talking about?
I guess the koshis that we just witnessed. I think the last one, it seemed like the hips were deep, and then like the throw, I don't know. I was just trying to get a good you know,
Yeah,
picture of the little nuances.
Or look at it.
See that foot go back?
Yeah, we do that too. We step back at the end of a Koshinage, right? Usually with the inside leg to keep the UK from falling on your leg.
I see that.
He's just stepping back at I think he had that way of stepping back at a slightly different angle than I think normal people do. I think that's what that is.
Okay. Thank you, Sensei.
Sure.
It makes sense.
Yeah. But, you know, he did things different ways. You know, it wasn't always the same way by any means. And so it made it a little challenging to follow, because he was always like kind of working on things, but also he would just do things different ways. And sometimes he would acknowledge he was doing things different ways, and sometimes he wouldn't. And we kind of had to, you know, sort it out. But there is variation in his demonstrations.
So he's like, he's writing the book, but not with words. So yeah, it makes, yeah.
Yeah. It's more like a blog. Okay, let's take a look at Yamada Sensei. So he's talking about not standing in front of the uke, not, you know, in that case, not entering on the omote side. So basically he's talking about, you know, an irimi movement on the ura side. And now he's doing Ushiro Takubi Tori Kokyunage. This guy with the white hair, his name is Klaus. He has a dojo in Bonn, I believe. So this is Sankyo going directly to the hand, and then Henkawaza. Notice how Steve turns his face away when the atemi starts coming?
So was that a good example of being a prudent DK?
Yeah, you know, it's like when the atemi starts coming, it's a good idea to turn your face.
As opposed to blocking it or hitting it or something, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Sensei, on that previous technique, can you talk a little bit when we travel to other dojos in particular? We see that entry a lot, that sort of deep in the front.
Okay, good point. So in a lot of parts of the world, most places, they don't distinguish between stepping back and stepping in. Okay? So even Hambu Dojo, they often step in like that. So they think that, you know, because they're taking an angle that they can step in. And maybe they're right, but yeah, if you go to other dojos, you'll find they're not really making the distinction between stepping back and stepping in. It's more like changing feet one way or the other. And so, yeah, they do that. So the idea is, you know, don't step in too close. You take an angle, but it's definitely not sort of the way that we learn to do it. It's actually not doing it that deeply in that case, but you'll see examples that are much worse or much, you know, much more stepping in. But yeah, that's, so if you travel around to other dojos, you'll see that kind of movement a lot. And if you ask them, you know, if they're stepping in or stepping back, they won't know.
Oh, interesting.
So I asked Yasu one time why Kanai Sensei always steps back and never steps in. And he had me do a yokomen, and then he proceeded to kick me in the groin.
But yeah, so that is the idea, right? That's the idea. So that's why basically we don't step in into the omote side if you're doing like a tenshin omote type movement. And that's why Kanai Sensei did it that way. So the idea is that you keep distance until you are getting some control over the wrist, and then you can go in close. And that's the way we did it. And I think people are just not sensitive to that point. And that's why, you know, like I said, if you go somewhere and they're doing it, they won't know if they're stepping forward or stepping back. And if you tell them to step back, they won't be able to distinguish that. But you know, it's just because, you know, like I say, like even at Hambu Dojo, that's, if you watch movies of or videos of Doshu, pretty sure he does it that way. But he does take an angle. So I believe if you take the right angle, it works. But on the other hand, I think that, well, I like the way we do it. I think it's more logically consistent.
Sensei, this is David. Would other dojos call that tenshin, like when they step in like that?
They might or they might not. They might not have a name for it. Naming conventions are somewhat particularized, and Kanai Sensei had one of the most detailed naming conventions. So he was making a lot more distinctions than I think a lot of people were making. And then not only making a distinction between different movements, but then giving them names. And I think that's one of the good parts of what he was, how he was approaching it, because to me, it led to a lot more clarity about the nature of the techniques and the differences between different versions of a technique or different movements. To me, it made it much more easy to understand.
So definitely something worth analyzing. It's a great analysis.
Yeah, all these things, you know, when every part of it, really, you have to analyze it yourself, and especially if you go to other dojos frequently, which is a great thing to do because you encounter people doing things in very different ways, and then you have to sort of analyze that and compare it to the way we do it, and then you have to decide if like they're doing something better or worse, or if there's elements you can incorporate. You know, so this process of seeing different versions or different names, or you know, whether the people know they're doing them or not, it's very, very important, and you have to go through that process of analyzing all that stuff and comparing it and coming to some understanding somehow of either, you know, why we do things the way we do, or, you know, decide, well, we're doing one version of a technique and other people doing another, or you know, maybe they're right, or maybe it's right for what, you know, for the way they're approaching it. There is a tremendous amount of variation in Aikido, and I think part of where we're at is doing a lot of comparative analysis of what different people are doing, where we're at historically. All right, I'm going to come back. See, we do that technique differently. We usually do it with the inside knee. That Sankyo into Kokyunage or whatever it is. That little hop, that's from Koichi Tohei. So he's doing that step in again. Doing a tenkan when you throw also was like something that I think Kanai Sensei, I don't know if he originated it, but he definitely did it that way. And a lot of times people throw Kotegaeshi just by pivoting their hips and not stepping back. And actually, that's probably the most common Kotegaeshi you'd see out in the world. And Kanai Sensei felt like if you do the tenkan, your hip rotates further, and so you could make more power. And so that's why he did it that way. But you can definitely do Kotegaeshi the other way. There's also another way to do Kotegaeshi where you kind of slide into the UK as you push down on the wrist. So again, there's a lot of different variations. Kanai Sensei was looking for power when he threw. And so if he could figure out a way to rotate his hip further than, you know, than he would do it. And I think that was one of the factors in how he developed, how his techniques evolved.
Yeah, Sensei, he also did that on Ariminagi. When you watch him do it, he turns his hips a full 180 degrees on the initial entry, And most people, they only turn their hips like 90 degrees, and they lose that quarter turn of power.
On like Iriminage Omotewaza.
Yeah, for like Omotewaza. So like ski, Iriminage, Omote, well, or even Choko ski Iriminage. Where you just enter and turn your hips
Right.
the other direction. A lot of people only turn them 90 degrees.
Oh yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things I had to learn or correct when I started NEA because I wasn't used to doing that. And everyone at NEA was turning their hips the full half circle.
Yeah, that's right. And that the turning the hips when you enter is about cushioning the impact between the bodies, and then turning them when you throw is about making power. So those were two parts of his approach, and that's why I say, you know, there's three parts of every technique, and so you can distinguish. So the same hip rotation can be used in different ways in different parts of the technique, and I think that's consistent with what you're saying. Okay, so now this next one is Kanai Sensei's class at the at this seminar. 20th anniversary of New York Aikikai was like the biggest Aikido event that had happened in our world ever at that point, and everybody was there. And anyway, this is Kanai Sensei's class at that seminar. It's you can see how basic class work that he taught. Well, we didn't always do the rowing exercise, but.
Yeah, that's amazing that he did that.
One thing I just noticed there, his hands were turned with his thumbs down, kind of like how he finished a Riminage when he pushed forward.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so Aihan mi Ikkyo. Omote waza. Eh? So you can see there's one element where he's driving him to the outside and making him break his balance to the outside, and another one where he's just pushing him down right in front of him very low. Like that. Urawaza. So the power goes in the last turn. And the other point is that, like he said, you know, if you do a, you know, Ikkyo, Nikyo, those techniques, it's not different from projecting someone. You're still pushing your power out to them. Okay, Aihan mi Nikyo. Urawaza. That's Evan Greenland is the UK. He's very flexible.
Very long arms.
Where have I seen that before?
Yeah, really.
I was going to say, he seemed to really crank on that uke. That,
Yeah, he did. Well, yeah, we all did with Evan because he's very hard to throw because he's very long and lean and flexible.
Should I meet this guy and get some pointers from him?
Yeah. Now you can see Sensei's like not kind of stepping back almost out of the throw, right? That's sort of an artifact of his earlier stage. And I also think it's part of like how Evan was taking the ukemi. So that was like a typical class, 3 techniques. That's it. And so that was, those were the techniques he would show like in a regular old class at the dojo. And it would be like very simple, very basic, and not a whole lot of techniques. Most time is people practicing. Any comments on that one?
Did he ever talk to you, Sensei, about how to teach a class and why that was his pattern?
I got something.
Barbara has a comment.
Once we started teaching, he said the first technique should be basic. That was about the only.
Yeah, he didn't really say why he did that, but my interpretation was that he thought it was more important for people to focus on a limited number of things and really practice them and have the time for people to practice rather than the time of him demonstrating.
Okay.
That was my interpretation of why he did it that way. And it's in keeping with like his other attitudes that the main thing is to practice, and everything else is an extension of that. And so that's how I interpreted the fact that he would, often do no more than 3 techniques in a class. And the rest of the time he would walk around watching people and occasionally correcting people, but a lot of times just watching them and walking away, which was part of his pedagogy.
Thanks.
That was a video made by Dan Palmer, who has a dojo in Asheville, North Carolina, and took a lot of video of all the guys. He was a student of Akira Tohei Sensei in Chicago, but he's a professional videographer and did a lot of stuff. Okay, this one, we're only going to watch the first few minutes. This was the demonstration at that same seminar, and just going to watch Kanai Sensei's freestyle just because it's cool. So I always like looking at it. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's pretty cool freestyle. So that's Steve Pimsler. He was the master of ceremonies. And this demonstration, there were like a couple of thousand people in this place. It was at Hunter College. And it was the most people I'd ever seen watching an Aikido demonstration. So he introduced him as a direct student of the founder. So then that was not his whole demonstration. He went on and did a thing about Itamiwaza, but I just wanted to show that because I like it. And you can see like, real freestyle, like you new techniques emerge. He did at least 2 that I never saw before. Or, they're half, they're the kind of things that happen when you're really doing it. Everything doesn't go exactly as you practice it, but I think part of the Aikido is that you come up with the right movement spontaneously in the right situation. And I think some of the stuff he did there was a good example of that. Anybody have any comments on that?
I was just thinking it was kind of interesting. You know, we move away from doing like a certain type of technique that sometimes when people will do, I don't know, I guess there's not a name for it, but you just push one elbow up, one elbow down, and you just move out of the way.
Yeah.
And he definitely wanted us to stay away from doing that. They show a variety of techniques, but you can kind of see there, he still was leaning towards one elbow was going up, one elbow was going down, kind of like Sarubi Goshi.
Yeah, well, that was another thing. So part of it is historical because, like when I started, when people did freestyles, they just did that technique,
Right?
either stepping back or stepping in. We call it the ape throw.
The ape throw. That's right. That's
The ape throw. So Kanai Sensei started more and more emphasizing that people should do a variety of techniques on freestyles. Of course, it makes it much harder. And so, you know, it's not like you can't do those kind of techniques. It's just that, you know, at that point in time, everybody had just defaulted on that. That was what people thought freestyle was.
Yeah, I guess that was my point. This was an old enough video that was still a thing that happened.
Yeah.
Kanai Sensei.
Yeah.
When you guys say
it's not like you can't do those kind of techniques, you know, because they do come in handy and they're easy to execute rapidly, but you know, it's just how they fit in with the whole freestyle.
Excuse me, can you guys clarify what you mean by the ape throw?
Oh, the ape throw is like all right, let's see.
There were a lot of those being done in that last clip.
One elbow up.
One elbow up, one elbow down. You know, you just kind of, we call it, what do we call it? Well, if you do both elbows up, it's Niten Nage. If you do one elbow up, one elbow down, you know, it depends on the rest of the movement, actually, what we would call it. But, you know, again, like in those days, people didn't make those kind of distinctions. So, like, anyway, it was sort of like we had this derisive term for those techniques, especially because people did them only, you know, their whole see, that one is new. See, that's a kind of half Koshinage, like a judo thing, Makio Toshi. Eh? Yeah, he called it the ape throw.
That's painful.
See, that's an Okuri or Riminage, but around the waist, right? Makio
Yep.
Toshi. So anyway, did you see the ones where just one elbow's going up, one elbow's going down?
Okay, I see what you mean. Where the opponent's elbow, he's picking up and.
Yeah, and you
Okay.
can do it in different directions. It's a very easy technique to execute, and it works as long as you've moved, right? As long as you've entered. Like, and you could see he was entering every time, either sliding in or stepping back or something. So yeah, so that's that. All right, so now we're running way over, and it's already 7:26. So I'll show you guys one more thing, and this is the you can do this at home part of the show, and it's the Jo Kata. And so maybe because we're running out of time, we'll just look at the first part of it. And I sent on the email around 6 o'clock the list of the techniques of each movement in the Jo Kata. So you can refer to that if you want. That's a choku ski. And that's the first part of part one of the kata, right? And that's your Intoitsutai. And I forgot this. He said this is the throat. The target is the throat. Although it says on the sheet the solar plexus. Okay, so that's basically we call covering your head. It's called Harai Age Jodan Ukegame, or Harayage for short. And oh, this is another thing. So I'm just going to pause it here for a second. So usually when I teach this, I don't change directions, just to simplify it a little bit, and sometimes because of space limitations. But when he did it, he changed directions at different points. Thing was, the way he did the change of directions kept changing over time. And so I haven't decided which is the right version to do that, but that's why we usually do it just in one direction. So this is Kyoku Ski, which is number 3 in the kata. Skiage and Harayage again. So that's from the back, 1, 90-degree turn, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not doing this. This is in the video. You can see how the Harayage is in front of the body, how the left hand is sort of above the front part of the head. All right, so from there, change hands, yokomen, cover, yokomen. Now you step back there, which is not exactly how we usually do it. All right, ushiro ski, shomenuchi. Flip it over, ushiro ski. All right, so Zujo Gaeshi is calling that changing hands. Then Migi Yokomenuchi, which is Yokomenuchi on the right, and then Hidari Yokomenuchi, which is Yokomen on the left. Ushiroski, Shomen. It's either Ushiroski or there could be a transitional movement. That's Do, hitting the ribs. 1. So he's just demonstrating that. So that's 2, in this case, turning 90 degrees. Kyokuski 3. Skiage, cover. 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I guess he made it for like a 45-degree turn there. All right, so then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, And, good to watch his exact hand position. With a Jo, you're kind of free about how your hands are, but there's definitely ways that are better and worse for different movements. All right, but anyway, that's the first part, and so that's something you can do at home while we're in isolation here. And then, another thing you got to keep in mind with these things, like I said, the Jo Kata changed over time, and also he would change it if he, depending on how much space he had. So if he didn't think like there was enough room to do certain things, he would change it. Like I think on the second yokomen there, he was stepping back, but I don't think he really stepped back. I think that was just because he wanted to, maintain the space between him and the students. Funny story. Somebody said to him, "Oh, Sensei, you're doing the Jo Kata differently. Is it changing?" And he goes, "No, it's not changing. It's growing." Anyway, so that's part one of the Jo Kata. It's on your sheet. Some corrections I'd make on this, and the names, we don't often use the full names of these things, so it's another thing. The column that says aim, I would say it should be called target, but that's what you aim for, yeah. Okay. All right, everybody good?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. That was great.
I hope this was
Say-
useful. We'll
Good
do this.
job, Pete, putting it
Thank you.
together.
Thank you, Sensei.
All right, good guys. Please
Thank you.
send in comments, questions, and suggestions for what to do in the future.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sensei.